doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for joining in. To all our viewers and followers, this is Muktai, who is currently serving in the Public Health Department of the UK government, an ex-aspirant, and she's joined in today to tell us a little bit about her journey from UPSC to a development professional, and then right now in her current role in the UK government. So thank you so much for joining in, everyone, and thank you, Mukta, for agreeing to share a story with us. Do you just want to start off with your journey from UPSC to where you are right now, like a brief overview of everything?
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for providing me with this opportunity to share my journey and story with everyone. I think this is a really commendable and an important initiative. So congratulations to you and Circum, first of all. And thank you everyone, whoever has tuned in. I don't claim to be an expert in anything, but what I would like to do is just share my story and hopefully, it would probably be somewhat helpful to someone. Just to give like a brief overview, I graduated in management studies. And after that, I was campus placed into EY. So I was in financial services for 2 years. But I always had passion for public service. I was quite active in terms of certain issues during my student years, and hence I felt that I probably a corporate life wouldn't be for me, like although I was doing really well in terms of my professional journey at EY. And then I came across an opportunity about Teach for India. I, till that time, like many middle class families, didn't know anything about social sector or development sector and the opportunities that it has. So when I first came across Teach for India Fellowship, I inquired about it and then uh, applied for it and got through it. So while I really enjoyed my fellowship experience, I quickly realized that just being a teacher in a school, like, I wasn't able to do as much as I wanted to, because there are so many things coming, in terms of like top down administration. And I started looking then, what can be done. And that is when the germ thought, in terms of becoming an IS officer or giving UPSC exams sort of blossomed. And that is when I decided to give my attempt. So 2013 and 14 were the years when I gave like prelims. Unfortunately, I didn't clear. My first prelims I missed by very few marks. And also, that is probably because, I was not very confident about CSAT. My GS was really strong and my verbal was strong, but my quant wasn't my forte. And I had like a bit of an irrational fear when it comes to these competitive exams and quant, which sort of solidified when I gave my CAT attempt and didn't do as well in quant. And I went in, I think, quite nervous because of CSAT when I approached my prelims, which wasn't the best thing to do, in hindsight. And in the second year, because I had prelims cut off by such a close margin, I think it was like 3 marks or something. I thought that I had like good chance of cracking prelims the next year. So I decided to move from Mumbai. I'm originally from Mumbai, prepared in Mumbai. That's when like everyone started telling me that you have to like move out of Mumbai. Mumbai might not give you the kind of resources and the training that's required. But at the same time, Delhi was something which was on the cards, because I had never lived away from home, always was in Mumbai. So that point of time, my parents suggested like going to Pune instead. So I went to Pune, I studied there, but that wasn't again like the best decision, because suddenly I started living on my own. I didn't know anything about it. Was like a big thing. I underestimated how difficult that might be. Just a sudden change in everything like that you do. So that was quite tough. That was quite isolating as well, and that did take like a toll on my mental health. And like I didn't do well in prelims in that year as well. And then I decided to just start thinking about like what is there, like what options are there beyond. And
Mm.
how like I entered into the development sector, policy sector, worked in India for close to 5 years.
Right.
I did my master's.
So I'm just going to come here, interrupt you here. I wanted to know whether you jumped into preparation with any idea on how many attempts you're going to take, or was it something that was organic that you decided once you gave your second prelims? Did you decide in advance that this is the cap I'm going to put on the number of attempts I take?
I know that a lot of people do that. Like I didn't
Mm.
initially, because I just like wanted to figure it out for myself. What happened
Mm.
like, in the first year, because I was working already that point of time. I was a professional. I had no background in terms of like some people start preparing like early on.
Mm.
11, 10, like 12 standard and things, which is like very
Right.
fairly common. So and accordingly like choose what to study as well, which is aligned with their perhaps optional or something like that. So because I jumped in like completely not knowing how it is, like what preparation
Mm.
would really demand out of me, I just like had kept that option open. But at the same time, I quickly realized within these 2 years that perhaps the way people study for UPSC wasn't really like aligned with the kind of person I am, because that whole isolation aspect, not
Mm.
feeling as if you're doing something other than like just like sitting in a room and studying and being in that bubble, wasn't kind of gelling well with the kind of person I am. I'm very quite action oriented. And even though like I do have like I love to like put a thinking hat on once in a while, but at the same time I like
Mm.
to also be involved,
Right.
initiatives on the ground and see how they play out. So if probably I would have done like would have volunteered somewhere, or I would have done like an internship somewhere, probably that
Mm.
would have been a better way to go about it now looking back. But because it's the like the norm is that you just take a break and you focus 100%, that is what I,
Right.
but that didn't work.
Completely isolated, don't do anything else, just do one thing.
It wasn't for me at all, like just didn't gel with my
Right.
personality. And that's when I realized that
Mm.
should like decide for their own how they want to like approach the exams and how they want to study, instead of just following like a set pattern or like a set
Mm.
of going about giving your attempts.
Mm. Right. So now taking off from where you were left, I think, on how you decided to move on. So how was that decision like, and what were the first areas that you decided to explore? So did you sort of sit with yourself and, come up with this whole plan that I want to do this. If this doesn't work out, I'll move to this. Was that the next step strategy for you, or did you apply something else?
So the way my life has like has come about like or so far, it's
Mhm.
very interesting, I feel, because I'm not like really a big planner. I'm not like someone comes up with a 10-year plan and then like decides, because I also feel that a lot of times probably like a 16 or 17-year-old Muktai would
Mhm.
have known like how like to apply for say civil service here, or like wouldn't have dreamt even to do her masters from Oxford, like things like that, right? Because there is so much that you don't know, especially like coming from like say a fairly like humble background where none of,
Mhm.
like your family members have any idea about like some unconventional choices, like for India at least. Nowadays those things are changing, but like say 10 years back that wasn't really the case.
Mhm.
So I have come to realize that like it's good to plan, like and good to like know and gather information, but also like there is like no point in being quite like set in your ways, because sometimes you just have to adapt to
Yeah.
things that happen in your life. Like, you can't foresee everything. So keeping, like, being flexible is like a main thing. But how I came about then deciding to move on is when, like, as I was telling you, like, the second year wasn't the best for me, like living away from. Although, like, I started adapting myself, but it was fairly isolating. It took a toll on my mental health, and just didn't seem like this is what I want to keep on doing year on year. I felt as if I was just sort of at the same time, like, you see your friends, other people around you, like, doing other things. So that is when and at the same time, during that time, I ended up, like, happened to visit Baba Amte's Anandvan. And that
Okay.
sort of, like, brought in that one thought in my mind, that is basically made me think that if you are really passionate about public service, is like IS the only means of achieving that? And the answer was no. The answer was, like, there must be other things to do. Like, if you really are passionate, you can, like, pave your own way. There are other opportunities to explore. And that is when I decided that I needed to, like, start gathering more information about development sector, what opportunities are out there. And a few of my friends had also left their corporate jobs, and, like, not too many, but a few, and they were exploring development sector as well. And, like, together we started, like, exchanging some information, like, found out about what organizations are there, um, operating in this, like, sector. And because I was in education, I decided that perhaps I would love to, like, explore something in public health, although there are now area of, but, like, education, health, like, seems like the big two major things when it comes to public policy. So I decided to explore certain opportunities in public health with civil society organizations. And that is when I decided to move on, because in second attempt, I got through MPSC. I had gotten an interview as well. Like, MPSC means I got an interview, but I decided not to go ahead with it, because by that
You
time
didn't attend the
I
interview, like you didn't end up appearing for the interview.
no, I did not, because I was very clear that, like, by that time I already had applied to different civil society organizations and had gotten through, like, two of them, and then had already decided to go ahead with one of them. And it seemed extremely interesting, the kind of work that they were doing. And I just thought that that sort of aligns much better with how I would want to, like, want my career to further. Yeah.
Right. So, post that you started work, and when you were transitioning, was there anything that you felt you missed out on, like any sort of skills? Because there are a lot of, especially today, in like this year, if someone is looking to transition, there are a lot of skills that become redundant and a lot of new skills that are waiting to be, that aspirants are waiting to take on. So is this, was that something you faced, that you had to upskill yourself in a particular manner, or it came with the flow of the job?
So I didn't, like, I immediately applied, like, with whatever work experience I had. And at the same time, I did not, like, decide to leave, like, the 2 year gap on my resume. I, in fact, like, mentioned that I was preparing for civil service examination. And I also brought out, like, some of the things that I studied and how they would be, like, relevant to, like, some of the roles. So it is important to know, like, that the two, like, even if you haven't made it, it's not like you did not. Of course, like, we spend, it's so intensive, I feel.
That's very interesting. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you connected your role with this? Because I think a lot of our viewers will find that a very actionable thing to do. Something that you study and how you could connect it.
So I had, like, I don't want to name names, but I had, like, applied to, like, one of the organization in that works in a political activism space in,
Okay.
and they come out with reports. They do, like, research and come out with reports, like, are very influential reports about the way how effectively certain initiatives have been by the government, whether they have made an impact, they have not made an impact. They conduct surveys, things like that. So those reports are quite telling. So I thought it would be interesting to apply to their organization. I had gotten through their organization as well. So they for their role, particularly our understanding of study of, as well as our sorry, I'm able to hear. Is this something that somebody
Yeah, there's
probably?
some audio issue is very possible.
Okay.
I think it's better now. Can you continue?
Okay.
Take off. Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's some I can hear myself. So.
No, there are a few words that are a little. The rest of it seems fine.
Okay.
Go on. In case it's very difficult for us to understand, I'll let you know.
Okay. So I also how, since we read paper, we are.
Just, I'm going to stop you there. There are bits where your voice is just not coming. Is that something everyone's facing? Can you put it in the comments, or is it just me? Echoing. Yeah, there's something echoing. There's an echo in the audio.
Should I rejoin? Will that help?
Right now, it seems fine. I just took off my earphones. Maybe that could also be the reason why this is happening.
Probably.
So I'm
on, probably it's
yeah. So what we can do is, I don't think there's a pause thing available. So I'm going to fix this. So just give me a second. I'll just figure out how. Am I audible?
Can you can you hear me? Should I say something?
Right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. So when you're talking, I'm just going to mute myself in case the audio is. Your audio is fine. So I think you can go on.
Okay. Sorry. Could you please remind me what so I was talking about the some of the transferable skills. So yeah, I think it's important to look at the profiles that you're applying for, and what kind of transferable skills that you can mention in your CV, that would probably be apt for that particular job. So not just say that, oh, it's a gap in my CV. Instead of that, just try to make those 2 years relevant as well. I think that's an important thing to do. Or however service.
Right. So now you've had a substantial experience in the policy space. What do you have to say about a career in the development sector in India? How can one go about planning it, if at all there's a possibility? So you mentioned how a lot of things don't work out for you in a very planned manner, right? So in case there's someone who wants to kind of plan or chart a path, what are the things they can keep in mind while doing so, and while considering the development sector public policy in India?
Yeah, so I would say that it didn't happen in a very planned way, perhaps for me, because I had to figure a lot of it out myself. So that is the reason, why I feel it's important, and through platforms like yours, it is important to provide information, to people. And also, another thing that I have gotten over is my inhibition to approach people, and just try to schedule a coffee chat, or just nowadays it's so easy because of the everyone is okay with virtual chats and things like that. So I think it's really important to figure out who could be a person that you can speak to and figure find more information about. So in terms of development sector, there are quite a few opportunities. So first of all, something like research, that is one area where if you have that kind of a background, and if you like academia, you could think about becoming a research assistant, and then perhaps pursue your PhD as well. But having said that, a master's is important if you want to go in that direction. The second one would be development sector projects. So a lot of civil society organizations are there who get either foreign aid, or some sort of an aid, raise funds, and they have their projects that are running in the country, or in other parts of the world. And you could be the program manager, a strategy person, monitoring and evaluation officer or manager. So there are those jobs as well, so programs and implementation of the programs, so designing and implementation, operationalization. And then in terms of policy, there are think tanks that you could consider joining. There are certain organizations that particularly work on public policy, which also include some of the consultancy firms. So either say McKinsey, BCG, or then Big Four. In Big Four, they have the government advisory services, and they end up taking on certain projects by the state or the central government, and they end up consulting them on those. So there are different multiple avenues to go about. Another route is fellowships. So I would say chief minister fellowships for different states have those, or LAMP fellowship. Ashoka has fellowship, Teach for India, for example. So that is another way to see how you like working in this space, and then probably build upon that.
Right. So, and health seems to be a common thread that ties your whole career in development. So, was that conscious, or it just happened on the way you started getting projects that were of that nature?
So when I, after UPSC, decided to like enter into development sector, the first role that I had was with an organization called Paths. It is a Seattle-based organization that has projects in many countries, and they particularly focus on public health. And it was, my first project was a Gates funded project in Mumbai for tuberculosis elimination, and it was a private sector engagement project. It was really interesting. And then I ended up developing and working on projects in other parts of the country, like Uttar Pradesh, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh. So that gave me a lot of exposure in terms of how health systems are, they are quite different because of the nature of our makeup of our country, it's neither federal nor union. And and health is something that you have central projects as well as state projects. So it's quite complex and interesting, and different states are at different level of development in terms of their public health as well. And I just loved working in public health. I spent a lot of time with the communities on ground. I visited patients and their families, as well as when I was working on something which is like beyond drugs and diagnostics. So I wanted to specifically work on socioeconomic determinants, because that's a huge area that gets overlooked when it comes to public health. Like there's so much focus on just getting the patient on treatment that we just forget that it's a human being end of the day. So it's just like, there are you have to look at like health holistically, like, and not just curing like, a disease, right? So when I worked on that, especially in Uttar Pradesh, like, we engaged with more than 4,000 Mahila Arogya Samitis and Anganwadi workers, as well as certain self-help groups, women self-help groups, because women tend to be the primary caretakers in many families, and hence it's important to involve them and engage them for better health and reach when it comes to community engagement. So that, like, those experiences made me believe that it is like the work that I do can really touch lives, and it can really impact like, lives of not just like a person or like two people, just like families and like thousands of people. Or even beyond that, if you're working at like a national level. And it just felt right. I just like, just developed sort of a passion for it, and stayed with public health as a result of that.
Right. So that sounds very interesting, that you give us hope that after, or even without being in the service, as we all imagine to be, we can still create that impact, or create that sort of change that we want to create. So thank you for that. I hope everyone
Yeah,
watching, listening. Yeah.
it is
All right.
definitely possible. I have seen so many people and so many examples, like, with my peers and other professionals and colleagues, where, like, you see that there are so many opportunities and avenues these days. So if you are passionate about something, if you really want to, like, and even if you aren't, like, even if you just are figuring things out, there are ways to do that. And it's like, I think it's completely all right to think that probably, like, you want to change your sector, or like you want to explore 2 or 3 sectors. That's perfectly all right. You don't have to like take on just like one sector, and like, just all of your jobs should be aligned with that, because a lot of people also like, shift their sectors. Or these days also, for example, climate change and health, like, there is an intersection for that. Health and education, there is an intersection when it comes to that. So there are like, different ways in which you can work. For example, my current role involves policy making when it comes to violence and abuse. So we work a lot with Home Office and Ministry of Justice, so which is like a very different area as well. Like, so these are the intersections, like, that you don't really think about necessarily, like, when you're thinking about like only having a sectoral approach. And to be honest, like, according to like, I have whatever, like, this is my personal belief. I think unless and until we don't have like a multi-sectoral, multi-agency approach, it's extremely difficult to solve some of the issues, because they're so complex in nature. And like, it's basically, instead of creating parallel systems, if we have like a joined up approach, that's always much more effective. So I think to think that way, if you think that way, like, you can think about multiple avenues. And yeah, there's no need to think that, oh, this is it.
Right. So, since you touched upon your current role, I was actually going to your master's, but since you mentioned your current role, do you want to tell us a little bit about how it is to be working in the UK government and what is different? Uh, yeah.
Yeah. So I did work with Ministry of Health. I was seconded to Ministry of Health. It was a USAID funded position. And I worked on, like, this is like, I'm talking about India, so I'm like giving like sort of a comparison. And I worked on developing first policy framework for India for tuberculosis elimination, like, in how do we adopt as I was talking about, a multi-sectoral approach for that. And we ended up within the first year of its implementation, we ended up signing MOUs with Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Railways, and Ayush, and these three ministries I prioritized for MOUs because they already had a health infrastructure in the country. So it was much more effective to just think about the linkages that we could have had with them. So it was a really amazing experience working at CTD, Central TB Division, Nirman Bhavan, Delhi. Then when I came here, I would say the difference is, although I was working with the ministry, I wasn't technically a bureaucrat. I was still working with WHO consultants. So India has for those who don't know, India has a WHO consultant network in the country, and they support the technocrats and bureaucrats. So I was working with the WHO consultant as well as the additional Director General for TB in his office. So it wasn't I was sitting in that place and having to think about different political considerations, and wasn't necessarily all of that. But now in this role, as a civil servant, you are bound by certain it's a little bit more restrictive. You have to think about different aspects of how you can influence, what are the ways to do that, what are the tools in your toolbox perhaps to go about it, and how do you bring different partners and stakeholders together. Another major difference is obviously the whole health system is very different. It looks different in the UK because they have the NHS, which is central, it's quite central, although there are regional differences and disparities, they aren't as complex and stark as I would say as India's health system is. So there are those differences as well, but I would say working with ministry definitely helped me when I first started working here. The second aspect was ministerial briefings and parliamentary business. I never had to think about briefing a minister. I was given a task, I was helping the ministry with that task. But now I learned I had to learn how the parliament functions here, how the parliamentary business gets conducted, how do you write briefings, or how do you brief your ministers. So that aspect is quite interesting as well.
So I wanted to know if any of your answer writing ability has come in handy while writing these briefs, because that was one thing that we do throughout our preparation phase, sit and write answers. So any of those things coming in handy now?
I would say I personally believe that anything that you learn in life never goes to waste. You might not be exactly quantify how it's playing a part, but it does. And especially when it comes to UPSC preparation, I think it is so much that even though we might decide to move on, there is still so much that we leave with that can influence you, the way you speak, the way you conduct yourself, the way you write, as you mentioned, the way you think, that is a big part of UPSC. How do you think about a particular issue, how do you develop that thinking from different varying perspectives. So it's quite it's everything, I think, plays a part. Also my master's in public policy, I would say, did help because usually when you brief ministers, you have to give them policy recommendations, and then you say this is what we recommend and this is what we don't recommend and why we aren't recommending this, right? So those are the skills that I also learned and sharpened during my master's. because we have to write like, policy papers. So yeah.
Okay, so coming to your masters, how did Oxford happen, and was that again a very planned thing, or was that spontaneous?
As I was saying, it wasn't planned in the sense that I wasn't like a girl in 10th standard, like, thinking about going to Oxford. Like, that was never on the cards, to be honest. I didn't, let alone like, going to Oxford. I didn't even think about like, going to another city for my undergrad. Uh,
Is it just me or others are facing audio issues? Mukta, just a sec.
yeah.
Could be just me. Can anyone let me know if Mukta is audible?
Hi, can you hear me? Am I audible? I can't see any comments. Can you see any comments?
Mukta, you can hear me, right?
Uh,
Can you hear me?
they're saying that I
Yeah,
can.
so can you send me another request? Can you
Yeah.
leave this and send me another request? Maybe I can fix the issue.
Am I audible? Can someone comment and let me know if I'm audible?
Hi, can you hear me? Is it better?
I still can't hear you. Is your volume the same thing?
No, it should be all right. Can you hear me now, Jean? I think you are on mute.
Yes, you are audible. Please go on. I think there are network issues because there's heavy rain here.
Okay.
That could be a possible reason
Yeah.
why. All right, so we were talking about your application to Oxford and how you got there.
Yeah, so telling you, so just to like, give you some context and yeah, those who are listening to our chat. So my schooling was done in Marathi. And as well as like, I don't come from a family like, where we have like a lot of people who probably like, know a lot about development sector or like different avenues, because like my dad's generation was the first generation who went to school, so my like I'm like second generation that ever went to school. So thinking about like dreaming about Oxford was really not on the cards when I was growing up. I started thinking about it, to be honest, like, when I went to Delhi, so I moved to Delhi, because I was working, I was still with Path, and I was working on a national project, like a nationwide project by Global Fund. And then I started, changed my organization, started working in policy space a lot more. And that is when I got exposure to, public policy, as a career, what are the opportunities, that are there in it. And then I started thinking about doing my master's, because I had already done, along with my work, I had done one master's in development studies from IGNOU. And I thought that, taking a break and doing a master's full time makes sense. And I only applied to the UK, I only applied to LSE and Oxford. And when I was thinking that I probably should, apply to UCL, University College London, is when I already, I heard back from Oxford that I got it. So I didn't go ahead with any other applications.
Any reason why you stuck only to the UK, or it was so? Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, I already knew, thanks to my UPSC prep, that I'm not someone, who probably can just sit and study for a long time, without doing anything. I already had worked close to 5 years. Health systems outside India. I wanted to, think if, in terms of building a career in global health, particularly. And that's why, it made sense to go abroad. And then between US and UK, UK seemed like a better option for me personally.
All right. And when it comes to what kind, because a lot of people watching us right now and watching us later or listening to this later may also want to know what scholarship options we could explore, if at all, and what are the other things that we need to keep in mind when applying and then when coming. So,
Yeah.
or going. So, anything to share there?
So many people apply. So the two most popular scholarships are Commonwealth and Chevening. When it comes to UK, education in the UK. And then there are definitely, other scholarships in India, say probably through Tata, or other places that you could get a scholarship for. But again, that depends on whether they are, sometimes they partly sponsor you, so you have to know whether you are meeting the eligibility criteria, and whether what they have to offer it aligns with what you need. That's the second thing. Then there are certain university specific scholarships. So there is a Commonwealth Oxford scholarship. So it's there's a split when it comes to funding. That then WHT Wilman Hoffman scholarship, which is again specific to Oxford, and also some of the people from my course got it. And then the academic, this office, or the application, during application process, you could reach out to the office and ask them if there are any private philanthropists who might want to sponsor you, because that happens sometimes, that they have a list of philanthropists. These are private individuals who say that, oh, I'll go ahead and sponsor one person's tuition, something like that from your course. So they also have those. But having said that, I would say that for India specifically, because there are so many scholars from India, or so many candidates from India every year. And also the intake of out of the total batch, there will be few, probably one person will come from one country, but from India there will be 4 or 5 people, because they want to be representative in terms of their cohort when it comes to, and align it with the size of the population of that country. So it is not definitely easy to get that, but there are different ways of approaching it. I would suggest making a list, just in an Excel, or somewhere, just put in different scholarship names of scholarships, what are their closing dates, what how do you go about applying for it, and then also start looking up on LinkedIn or through your networks if anyone had gotten that scholarship, and start having scheduling chats and learning more about it. Just to also mention that there is something called Project Edu Access, which is an initiative started by some Oxford alumni, and it is also funded by a Rhodes Scholarship. And I'm a mentor as part of that initiative, and we are specifically looking at candidates or students who are coming from marginalized communities, and we are trying to mentor them. And if you feel anyone who's tuned in, if you want to look that up, please do so.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I think people who are there right now, and even in future, if anyone's watching this, they'll probably will reach out to you if it applies to them. Okay. So post Oxford, and what do you while at Oxford, what did you make of the course? What is the course structure like? And if you could give us a brief overview, very brief, on what subjects are there, how it's structured, and what are we looking towards if we're deciding on or considering a public policy course there?
I would say it would be much easier to just go to MPP course website. All the details are listed there. Master of Public Policy. It's the school is called Blavatnik School of Government. BSG. So if you just look up MPP course, all the details are mentioned in terms of what are the different subjects. There are too many to list right now, but there are 3 semesters that happen, because 1 year master's course in the UK, and after the 2nd semester there will be an examination, and then you have the 3rd semester, and the 3rd semester is where you get to also choose some of the options, like an optional, some of the subjects are optional to take. So for example, I had chosen health system, public health and health systems, because that is something I'm interested in. So you the 1st and 2nd semester, those courses are more or less foundational courses for public policy. So you don't get to have a choice for those. But then in the 3rd semester is when you can choose any particular courses that you are interested in.
So while we can also take questions from anyone who's there right now, I don't know what repetition is wanted. Could you clarify on what you want us to repeat? We will get to that. But till then, if there's any general thing that you would like to tell aspirants in terms of, especially those who are transitioning, on what the prospects in the public policy space look like, whether in India or now outside India, since you've had a taste of both. What would you like to say to these people?
So when we development sector in general, like, that also sort of is similar with the public policy space. So again, like, you can work with think tanks, you can work with like research organizations, civil society organizations. Again, in civil society organizations, some of them are like, much more research oriented, like for example Welcome Group in the UK, like, they are much more research oriented, whereas like something like CHAI, like Clinton Health Access Initiative, or Tony Blair, like, um, uh, foundation, like they will be like much more focused in terms of programmatic implementation. So there's like a mix of that as well. And then of course UK civil service, I can like just speak a little bit briefly about it. So when I applied for it, first of all, I didn't know that we could apply as Commonwealth citizens, but apparently we can. Also, like there's a caveat that every application, like, will mention the nationality criteria, and some of it these days unfortunately says that Commonwealth citizens who have right to work in the UK. And if like, that advertisement says that, that means you need to have right to work. That means you can't be in India, like, just come out of like UPSC prep and then apply. That means either you have to have like, student visa that allows you to work in the UK, or you need to have already like a work visa which is being sponsored by some other employer. So just like, check those criteria as well before you're applying.
So there's this question on assistance to candidates from marginalized sections. The initiative you were talking about, I think some elaboration if you could do there. What is the
Okay.
initiative about, and how can it help marginalized
Yeah.
candidates?
So you could look it up, like, perhaps we could mention it later, like, Jill, somewhere in the comments, perhaps, like, or in the post itself. It's called Project Edu Access, EDU Access. And you can, like, look up their website as well and apply there. So it is all about, like, mentorship for, like, candidates who are coming from marginalized communities in South Asia, like, these, like, with a focus on India. And what we are doing is provide them with two mentors. One is going to be technical mentor, and the other is going to be like, like sort of a personal mentor with whom like they can share their concerns, and like, they can like talk about different issues, things like that. And through this process, what we are trying to do is help them when they apply for their masters or any other program. We are going to help them to review like their application, like, provide them with necessary information when it comes to scholarships, like, just the hand holding and support that is needed, especially as like, people who come from like, who either have marginalized identities or come from underserved communities. They do not have that kind of support in place, and that is what we are trying to do.
Right. Thank you for that. There was one question on whether it's a good idea to go abroad to pursue MA in public policy. So, what was the driving force behind you going abroad vis-a-vis doing it in India?
So again, it depends, like, it depends on what do you want to do, like, after your master's. That is an important question to ask. So as I said, like, I was quite interested in global health, and hence it made sense to perhaps like, go and do my master's in another country, which would open up like avenues for me to work in like, other countries and spaces. So that was the motivation. But if you think that like, you want to be in India, and if you want to like, you see yourself in India also has like, needs professionals. It needs like, people like, who can take things ahead. So you can very well like, do public policy course from India. There are great institutions, educational institutions in India, and there is no requirement as such that you have to go to the US or the UK or any other country.
Right. So, One question I had, since I've interacted with a lot of doctors also who happen to be in this community, and a lot of them, for whatever reason, moved from the exam preparation back to what they were doing. So, what would you tell them? Because a lot of doctors are also looking for areas of work. So,
Yeah.
is it a good idea for them to pursue public health? And do you think we need more doctors even in that domain?
There are already quite so if you look at public health domain, a lot of them come from who were who did MBBS and then they did MD in say community community health or something like that, right? So there are a lot of people whom I've and colleagues whom I've worked with who come with that background, like medical background, and then they move to public health after probably like a little bit of practice or working in a hospital or somewhere. And then there is like another set of like doctors who are epidemiologists, so they have done their doctoral studies. So there are plenty of them already, and we obviously there's always, like as I said, there are a lot of opportunities in this sector. So I wouldn't say that, a particular thing is about, it's your skill, but you people, there are always like opportunities to go ahead and explore.
Right. Interesting. So, I think I'm not sure if I can find any other specific questions, but anything else that you would like to say with respect to how you can, fruitfully bring your UPSC journey to your career, either either when you're talking about explaining your gap years or when you're actually on the job. Like, what are the ways in which you can fruitfully bring your preparation to your work world?
So I think like one important thing is that unfortunately I feel there is still so much stigma around not making it, not being on the list. So I feel that the first step would be to know that even during preparation you have upskilled yourself in many ways, and just having a little bit of an introspection in terms of what that might be and how you want to put that forth in terms of your narrative, or like for example SOP, right? When you're applying for higher education, your statement of purpose is really important because that is how you tell your story, so I think the first thing is not to feel like a failure. I know it's really really difficult. I went through that myself. I struggled with it myself. So I know it's easier said than done. Uh, but just knowing that these how many ever years you've spent studying for UPSC isn't waste of your time or anything like that. In fact, you have learned a lot of valuable skills and transferable skills. Just having a think in terms of how you might want to present those, either through your CV or through your cover letter when you're applying for opportunities, or through your SOP when you're if you decide to go for further studies. I think that is really important.
Right. I think we've pretty much covered everything we earlier thought we would cover. Anything else you'd like to say? Anything that I probably have missed in the thing, or just anything that you feel you should have heard when you were transitioning?
I always one I would like to mention is power of just being connected and paying it forward. It sounds so cliche, sorry, but I genuinely do believe that we have to help each other out, and if you are in that place, and all of you, I'm sure, like, will be in that place when you will be successful in whichever career that you choose to pursue. I think it's really, really important to then invest some time back in the community and, like, speak to as many people as you can, provide them with the information that probably you didn't have when you started your journey. And that's the reason why I mentioned in the beginning also, Gilles, that this is like an amazing platform for that. And I'm really happy that you're like, you and Sargam are making this effort. But yeah, like, I think that is really important that we tell each other our stories, and also, like, don't shy away from speaking about it because we are feeling like a failure, or if we feel like, oh, we didn't, because there is like always the stories that get covered are the stories of, like, people who make it, but there are, like, thousands and thousands of stories of, like, people who don't. And I think that that takes a lot more courage, doesn't it, to then, like, take a call and move on. And it is very, very difficult, but it is very doable. And I think we need to, like, look back and be proud as well that we dared to take on this huge task, although, like, we weren't exactly successful in traditional terms of success, but there's so much that we take away from it. So I think it's always good to, like, have that little bit of a positive spin on these experiences.
Thank you so much. I think that positive spin is much needed for a lot of the people watching us and probably who will watch us later. It's something that will keep a lot of us going. So thank you so much for sharing your positive spin with us and allowing us to take a little something from your journey and allowing us to think about how we want to uh, picture ourselves next, or imagine, or even, plan our path. And in case if anyone has specific questions with respect to, say, Oxford, or with respect to planning something out in the public health domain, would you be open to people reaching out to you, say, on LinkedIn or any other place that you would like to direct them?
I would say, to drop me and, like, a message on LinkedIn, like, because I get quite a few requests. So I would say, like, if you just send me a random request, I wouldn't know, like, so instead, if you just, like, just three, 4 lines about your little bit of background and, like, why do you want to, like, why do you think it would be helpful for us to have a chat, something like that on LinkedIn, perfectly fine. Yeah, that works.
Great. So I think that brings us to the close of this session. Thank you so much for making the time and speaking to us about, like you said, it takes a lot more courage to come out and share a story of what traditionally, conventionally looks like a failure, but isn't necessarily one if you can utilize it in the correct manner. So thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
Mukta, and wish you all the luck in your career right now. I'm guessing the political climate there is not exactly, yeah.
We shall
I see
see.
that smile, and I see the civil servant being restrictive now. So,
No, we will, like, so one thing about bureaucracy is, like, no matter what happens, the bureaucracy will keep turning, like, churning. So I guess, like, we shall see. But, like, yeah, interesting times.
thank you so much for joining in, and I'm so sorry for all the technical snag that happened because of network issues, audio issues.
No worries.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, and thank you, Muktai, for making the time. Thank
Thank
you. This was such a wonderful conversation, and I hope that a lot of people learn from your story and reach out to you for help. And we see a lot more voices, marginalized voices in Oxford and across the world. Thank you so much.
so much. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Thanks. Bye. Take care. Bye.
See you.
Bye.